Anything worth having is something that you're gonna have to work for, and it's gonna be difficult, and it's gonna require sacrifice.
There's quite a bit of assumptions that go into creating your reality, and you're kind of unconscious to how much of that is fluid. So I'm like changing my reality unconsciously from day to day, and I'm not even aware of it. So let's talk about your background as a pilot. How did that start?
That started in 2015, or it started a little bit before that, where actually my parents said that I would be good as a pilot, and that's kind of where the seed was planted a little bit. And I started looking at, can I even be a pilot? Do I meet the requirements and things like that? And then eventually I made the decision to apply for flight school. And in 2015, I got into Swedish flight school here in Gothenburg. And then I applied for a European airline where I flew the 737. And did that for a couple of years, 7 years almost, and then, or 6 years. And then I applied for a US airline. So now I'm flying for an American airline in the US. I'm flying the Boeing 777 there now.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot we could talk on there. But before we dive into just the pilot, what are your career aspirations? Are you planning to just focus on flying, or do you have a few pursuits?
I have a big dream as well that I've had, which is to start my own company, which is what I'm doing right now with my brother, where we have currently starting this e-commerce brand that we call Naked Viking, where we plan on selling anti-chafe swim shorts for people with bigger legs. So that's currently what we're doing. That's what I do on the side while I'm not flying.
So, do you plan to continue flying while you're building out this company, or do you want to pivot into just running this company full time?
It depends how the company goes, but if the company turns out to be really successful and things really work well, then I can definitely consider to go full time on the company.
Okay, cool. Well, I kind of want to talk a little bit about being in the cockpit because that's something that you have unique insight in that most of us don't. When you look in from like an outsider perspective, it looks insane. Like, how do you know what all those switches do? Yeah, yeah. How do you remember all that?
Checklists is one thing, and then you learn the aircraft really well. So for example, now recently, what I did was we had like a oral exam where you have to sit for 2 hours. A guy just comes in and asks you questions about the aircraft for 2 hours. And they can ask you pretty much anything for those 2 hours. So you have to know the aircraft really well, and then you learn to fly the aircraft as well with simulator training, and we call it chair flying, where you're sitting in a chair like we are right now, and just practice the flows, practice the checklists and things like that.
Do you actually use all of those switches and buttons, or are there like 20% that you always use and then the others you have to check the guidebook or checklist?
For pretty much all of them, we have a checklist, but it depends a little bit on the aircraft as well. But the most switches are used relatively frequently, and but there are some switches that we never use or never touch, especially switches related to emergencies and fires and things like that.
Do you go through security with the rest of us, or do you have like a special kind of access for flight crew?
Usually I go through, it depends also a little bit on the airport, but usually if I'm going to work, then I go through a different kind of security than what the passengers do.
Okay. Is it like what's different about it? I don't know if you can get into specifics. Is it faster? Is it less like, do you still have to take out your laptop and stuff like that?
Yes, it's
Okay.
especially in Europe, you still have to do exactly the same thing as the passengers do, but you go through something where maybe the line is not that long, it's not as crowded. So when I was in Italy, I was based there. We went through where the private jet people, the pilots and the owners of the private jets go. We went through that security instead of the one that was in the terminal.
What's the most turbulence you've ever experienced as a pilot?
We have things where we call light turbulence, moderate turbulence, and severe turbulence. Probably the worst I've ever experienced is moderate turbulence, and that is so bad so it will make walking or standing in the aircraft difficult, very difficult. Severe turbulence, you could seriously injure yourself if you're not seated and you have your seatbelt on. But moderate is probably the worst I've experienced. I don't know if anyone wants to experience severe turbulence. That's not a fun thing.
Do you work in shifts, or let's say if there's a 8 or 10 hour transoceanic flight, are you just 100% like on all time, or do you get like 90 minutes on, 50 minutes off, something like that?
It depends a little bit, but what usually the way it is that you fly with, if it's that long flight, it's usually three pilots or more, and usually those pilots then take turns. So two pilots start, and then maybe the rest are sitting in the back, and then once you're up in cruise, then one pilot goes and has rests for a couple of hours, sleeps a little bit, or eats or whatever he wants to do, and then they rotate kind of like that, and then once the other guy has rested, he comes back, and then another guy goes to have a break. So we don't sit 10 hours just in the seat, or 12 or anything like that. It's usually rests in between.
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't think you should for health reasons and focus and all that. In your expert opinion, how could flying be improved?
It is already extremely efficient. I don't think that I've actually never thought about that, how flying can be improved. I think that, I mean, there's always, room to learn from the latest crashes and the latest incidents, but that's such a broad, like, one incident can be different from another. But what the aviation industry is very good at is they take accidents, because especially when it's a catastrophic accident, there's a lot of stuff that's on the line. You have lives that have been lost. You have millions of dollars in damages, both on the aircraft and possibly on the ground as well. When they have these investigations, they take them extremely serious to make sure that they find out what the cause of the accident was, and then what they do to prevent such an accident in the future. So usually they take very good measures to make sure that they actually meet those, that this doesn't happen again.
Yes, yeah, I've been very impressed with how they sift through wreckage and piece it back together and just painstakingly break down what happened and how they can make it so it doesn't happen in the future. And that's really heartening for the passengers because we're very much out of control. Yeah, and to some extent, perhaps you are as well as the pilot, depending on what's going on. I've watched many of those Mayday kind of documentaries that show like a recreation of the event with the details. And it's I don't know how to describe it, but it's tragic, of course, but at the same time, it's like somewhat reassuring that at least it's getting safer. Like at least this thing won't happen again. And then it also boggles the mind with how complex an airplane is and weather and all these other things because there's so many variables that you wouldn't know until you know. It is amazing. Like in a century, we basically, I guess a little more now, but got to where we are, where it's very routine, safer than driving an automobile, safer than probably crossing the road in some cases. Do you know much about the supersonic projects going on, trying to get supersonic passenger travel back again?
I'm not super familiar with it, but what I do know is that the reason why we don't have supersonic is because the fuel burn increases when you go past the speed of sound. And so I don't see how we probably won't have supersonic, I think, for a while because of the increased fuel burn that you experience when you fly with a higher speed or at faster than speed of sound.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think if you made the kind of travel that we have now very comfortable, it's not that big of a deal. It's a few extra hours. But that said, if we did have supersonic, I'd love to try it out just to see what it's like. Have you ever gone skydiving?
No.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be a fun thing. It would be a once in a lifetime experience.
Yes, that's what it was for me, once in a lifetime. So, okay, well, let's pivot a little bit and talk about this e-commerce site. So you say you're doing it with your brother. What are your goals with that? Chafeless swim shorts, and is there any other products that you're thinking about as well?
To begin with, we just want to start with, the swim shorts, because one product is enough work to begin with. So we'll start with that. The goal is just to help people stop chafing, and then do it in a fun way that is kind of like in a Viking fun way. So we include our heritage of being Swedish, and that we are Vikings, and that we want to create happiness. So we built this story around it where we call it, the brand's called Naked Viking. And the reason behind that is naked because we want to create swim shorts that are so comfortable that it feels like you're naked, and Viking because we're Swedish and we're Vikings. And then we based our logo on a runic script that's called Wuncho, which stands for joy and happiness. And that's what we want to create with our brand, where we make maybe not people laugh out loud, but where they chuckle a little bit when they read our email or read our copy on our website. So that's kind of what we want to create.
I really like the runic scripts. They look really cool. Do you know all of them or like a lot of them, or do you just know a few?
I just know the one that we have for our. I mean, I looked through them while we just stumbled upon it, the runic scripts, because we wanted to. It took us forever to create the logo, but we wanted to have something that we could tell where it's just not a logo that many brands just have a logo, but maybe there's not a lot of meaning behind it, and we wanted to create some kind of story behind it, so we're a little bit more unique. So we went through the runic scripts, but I don't remember all the other ones.
But Vikings, maybe being in Sweden, you have your perspective, but being outside of Scandinavia, if you're not like just a layperson, what we hear about Vikings is that they were warriors, they were fierce, they were kind of ahead of their time. There's they do go on raiding parties, so like happiness and joy that doesn't isn't like first in mind. So where is that disconnect? Is it like could you tell us a little bit about like your relationship and understanding with Viking heritage?
So what I know what you mean, like they went around and they went on pillages and they you know raided places and they were pretty violent. And but those were the old Vikings. So what we want to focus on is creating kind of a new modern Viking that focuses more on creating the happiness and creating the joy rather than, so to speak, the violent past, how they were thousands of years ago.
Well, you certainly don't have a monopoly on that, but so maybe more like a Santa Claus Viking.
Yes.
Okay, that's neat. Have you seen the I don't know what they're called, but those like Viking jumps that they do? I don't know if it's in Norway where they like throw a rock to kind of break the water and then they jump from like 20 meters or higher maybe into the water.
I know what you're talking about. I did know that that happened in Sweden and in Norway, but I know what you're talking about. But those some pretty crazy people that do that stuff probably need a lot of experience to do that as well. But
Well, when you talk about Naked Viking, I was thinking people that do that might be a good kind of marketing campaign for your products because I think that that's catchy, really interesting to watch, and connects, I guess, some of that heritage.
that's actually a good idea. I haven't thought about that, but I'll look into that. That's a good idea. Appreciate that.
Sure. What's how long have you been doing this now? This project?
We've been doing it for a couple of months. We when we started out, we only had an idea, which is we wanted to create chafe-free swimwear, swim shorts, and that was basically it. And we didn't really know what we were gonna do, how we're gonna get this off the ground. So what we started off with was that instead of just building the product and starting getting going, we created a list of people that we thought would be interested in this. So it was friends of friends, it was people within our network, and we asked them, "This is our idea. Is this something that you would want? Do you want to pre-order a pair of swim shorts?" So that's what we did. We pre-ordered pairs. We asked them if they want to. We reached out to them, and they then some said yes, some said no. Most of them said no. And then we had a couple of people who were willing to pre-order our swim shorts, and that way we can confirm that maybe it's not $1 million idea, but there is a demand for it and there is potential for it. So that's how we decided that people are interested enough. There's enough demand for us to move on and test this idea a little bit further.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then are you focusing more on male swim shorts, prove that model, and then expand into female swim suits?
We thought about it. It's not something that's on the agenda anytime soon, but that could definitely be something if this brand turns out to become bigger and we grow. Then I'm definitely willing to go into female swimwear as well.
What's your work schedule like as a pilot? Like, how much time are you able to devote to this, for now, side project?
I'm actually very happy that I'm a pilot because it works very well with this. Where I right now I work 2 weeks and then I'm 2 weeks off. So during those 2 weeks, it gives me a lot of time to focus on the business. That way, I have about 2 weeks of uninterrupted time where I can spend as much hours and time as I want to on the business. So that works really well.
Yeah, definitely. And what are some of the challenges that you've faced so far with trying to start your own company?
First of all, it takes longer than what you plan. And that's one thing that I think everyone kind of misses the mark there, but it takes longer. And it's what we've had difficulty is finding a manufacturer that works for us and that creates swim shorts the way we want it. We knew that was going to be challenging, but we've had some samples that have been sent to us and they were good. We have something to work with, but they are a little bit, it's not, I mean, it's not, it's just the first iteration, but they were not exactly the way we wanted it. So it gave us, okay, we need to think about this. And it also taught us about, oh, we took some things for granted when we gave them this is how we want the swim shorts to look like. And we didn't mention some things because we thought they know. Like you have to go into very specific detail with how you want the shorts. Some things maybe we didn't go enough into detail to explain what it is that we want and the way we want it. And then kind of it turned without our knowledge, it turned into where we kind of assumed that they would know and then they didn't know the way we wanted. And that's how it kind of created a little bit of a disconnect. So we learned that we have to be extremely precise and careful with how we structure our words and how we explain that we want the shorts and how we show our tech pack, which is just a sample of the shorts in a digital form, kind of, where these are the features that we want and this is the material, things like that.
It's been amazing to me in a couple ways to discover how we have operated as humans because we have our own realities. And there's an assumption that your reality is exactly the same as my reality. And any deviation from that is like a competition over truth. Like, oh, no, you're wrong, Gabriel. It's because of this. And then when you realize that there's quite a bit of assumptions that go into creating your reality, and you're kind of unconscious to how much of that is fluid. So I'm like changing my reality unconsciously from day to day, and I'm not even aware of it. And then with my communication to someone else who's also doing the same things, it's a miracle we're still here. But for some reason, I think that there's a purpose for all of this. It allows us to adapt to chaos. And obviously, we build buildings, we fly airplanes. But when you're trying to create something new and you're working with suppliers or collaborators and you're trying to get on the same page, you start to see these sorts of things where you have to basically discover a new language, which how do you get everyone to agree to this new reality while at the same time everyone's showing up as individuals because they're going to innovate with you because you can only innovate so much as an individual. But if you have a bunch of different minds collaborating towards the same goal and you agree on what the North Star is, then I think that that's a competitive edge. And you're probably discovering that now.
Yeah, it's and that especially also a language barrier where maybe the manufacturers that we talk to, their first language is maybe not English. That also creates another barrier of, maybe they misunderstand some things. So it's been challenging, but we it's the first iteration and we're moving slowly forward. So it's difficult whereas you envision something in your mind and you need to put that on paper, and just putting it on paper or in a message is not enough. You need to make sure that the person who gets that paper also understands what it is that you mean and what kind of vision you have with the words that you chose to convey the information with.
Right. Where are your suppliers located?
So right now, our supplier is this. I'm not sure we're going to continue with this supplier, but this supplier is right now in Pakistan. But we want to ideally move to something where, because that's something that we also want to be able to maybe use in our marketing is to say that, oh, these shorts were made in. If we could say made in Sweden, that would be ideal. But I don't know if that's possible from a cost standpoint. Made in something that's not maybe China, then we can use that as well to our advantage to show that we're a little bit different. Oh, these shorts were made in, a country, where maybe the working conditions are not that bad.
As you probably know, Apple's workaround was designed in California, made in China. I don't know if they're still doing that. That'll probably change around the world as the suppliers kind of move around. But I know with Hasselblad's, the cameras, they use a lot of Fujifilm tech, but then they have like the Hasselblad interface and kind of design sense. It's a much better user experience, but people pay a premium. I think maybe 2x what they'd pay for the Fujifilm. And the end result is you could argue perhaps a little bit better with the Hasselblad, but probably not 2 times better. So you are very much paying for the brand, the quality, the aesthetic, all of that. So there is a case to be made, but it would probably be a more luxury product at that point because of the costs involved, as you pointed out. So yeah, it's a different decision, and maybe you could even have her like tiers. So maybe there's like, the more affordable and then like some premium line or something like that. But yeah, that's, interesting decisions to have to make. Have you visited your suppliers in person?
No, not yet. We haven't visited them yet. That's something that we want to do as well.
Still early days, but I've heard from some people who have operations similar to yours. They say that's essential. Meeting them in person, talking to them, because then they see you as a real person, and then some of those kind of misunderstandings, you get a little bit more context, so you can kind of understand. Oh, it's because of this thing, or this is how they do this, so I need to word it this way, or something like that. So, but yeah, I don't know when it makes sense for you to do so, but I would say that's probably crucial.
Yeah, that's something that's been on our list as well. It's just hasn't happened yet. But if we want to create the brand that we have in our vision and in our mind, then visiting the supplier is a must, and create that connection and establish, or at least to begin with, start with a video talk, kind of like we're doing right now, which we've had a little bit, and things like that. But where you maybe create more of a connection like that and then actually meet the person is something that I think is really really important with someone who you're probably going to do a lot of business with.
It's nice to have all the tech, but we're human at the end of the day. And I think that in-person energy is different on many levels, unconscious, etc. And so I think you're going to have better negotiations, better understanding, less misunderstanding. I know some people that have spent like 1 or 2 weeks, almost like a holiday, and they'll just sample. They'll go to like 50 different suppliers in like one region, just to see it, and then they make their decision. So you can work out the what makes sense for you, but that's something to think about, because as you probably know, that's a really important relationship to get right for a lot of reasons.
Supplier is probably the most important thing that we is probably the most important relationship we're going to have with our business, because they're going to be such an essential part of how our business works and how smooth things are going to be.
It's really interesting when you have this idea, like, hey, I'm swimming, I'm chafed by my shorts. I want to create chafeless shorts, and I'm Swedish, and so I want to pay homage to our Viking heritage. And everyone loves Vikings. They're cool, runic scripts, and all this. So you're doing all this, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. That's not nothing, but yet that's just the beginning. And then you have to like go through and canvas a bunch of suppliers, get the right one. There could be changes. Maybe something's changing. Then you have to switch suppliers. Then you're looking for costs. You're looking for quality control. You're looking for shipping, and then you're looking for like price strategy. Then you have like marketing, and then you have competitors, and there's just so many variables, and that's just like one product, let alone starting another product. So it is doable. Of course, I don't mean to discourage you, but it's what I mean is it's awesome. Like um, it a lot of respect for the entrepreneurial journey, and I wish you success. I think that there's a lot of interesting pieces there that I think you're on the right path, and so I think you can do it. But yeah, it's interesting to see kind of where you're at, kind of the decisions you're making right now as you build out this product.
I appreciate that. Appreciate it is extremely difficult, but I try to think of anything worth having. Anything worth having is something that you're gonna have to work for, and it's gonna be difficult, and it's gonna require sacrifice. And that's how I try to think of it when something difficult happens with this or anything really in life is. If I really want this, then this is what I need to do, and these are the obstacles I need to get over to in order to get what it is that I want.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have a website yet?
We have a landing page. So what we're currently doing is we have a newsletter. So we're sending out like just newsletters about our emails, about our brand, what it stands for, behind the scenes stuff, how with the journey, things like that. And then we are currently building a lead magnet, but the main goal is just to build our email list right now. So, and send emails and warm up that audience. So, we can give them some funny emails that make them laugh and create a little bit of happiness. And then once the product launches, we have a group of people that we can reach out to and see if they're interested. And they, part of since pretty much the beginning, that's kind of the goal right now.
So if people are interested, they can just go to nkdviking.com and sign up to your newsletter.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And is there anywhere else that you'd like to direct people?
Uh, that's the main thing for Naked Viking. Then I'm building my personal brand, which I'm doing on X. So if they want to go and follow me on X, they can do so as well. Which I think is the handle is at Gabriel, and then the little line that's at the bottom, Lindh.
It's at Lind_Gabriel, I
Yeah.
believe. Is there anything that we didn't get to touch on that you wanted to mention?
No, I think that sounds good.
Okay, great. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. It's really interesting hearing your insights as a pilot and an entrepreneur at the same time. I think I always like kind of cross pollination, and I like two different pursuits can kind of influence the other. So I'm really excited to see how the Naked Viking line pans out. And here's a safe flights for you in the future.
Thank you.